Playing or praying from the heart, number one. So, this is the first of a series of talks that I wanted to do with you about kind of the most important thing about playing shakuhachi, right? It's not about, especially in my school of playing, we don't worry so much about musicality or about techniques, although you need a certain degree of both of those. But the most important thing is this right here, your sternum. No, just kidding. Your heart, right? What's going on inside your mind, inside your soul, um, when you're playing. To me, playing is praying. So it's kind of a question of how to pray. The primary practice in Muon Shakuhachi is presence, right? And again, I'm a Christian who loves Buddhism, right? Augustine liked Plato. I like Buddhism. I'm still a Christian though, so I'm not going to. It's hard to talk about two things at once. So I'm just going to talk to you the way I am. Um, when you talk to God, it's a relationship. It's not unidirectional. It's not just me talking, and it's also not unidirectional in terms of it's not just me, like obeying blindly. Although that's maybe important sometimes. You remember when, or maybe you don't remember, God is talking to Abraham, and Abraham is thinking about his friend Lot, that's in his nephew Lot, who's in this city that God is about to destroy, and he's like, God, are you sure? Maybe what if there's like 50 good people in the city? You're going to destroy it then? He goes, oh, okay, if there's 50 people, I won't destroy it. And Abraham says, okay, well, yeah, maybe there's 40 people in the city who are good, And then we destroy it then? And God says, no, I won't destroy it. And he gets down and says, well, maybe there's 10 people who are good in the city. Would you destroy it then? God said, no, I'll save the city if there's 10 good people. So God, Abraham and God are in a relationship. There's some bargaining going on there. Um, and that's exactly what it is. It's a dynamic relationship with a living God. And it's being present to him that's the most important thing in my playing. So, how do you do that? So this is kind of the background, right? I'm intending on talking about specific pieces and kind of the way that I think about them. But I want to talk about something that sort of applies to everything this time. Um, there is a little placard, a card that I was given once by my Muon teacher, and it's something. There's a couple vows that they have in Muonji, right? That's the main uh, Muon temple right now, and I don't know if they're grounded in anything very old. It might have been something like a recent invention, but regardless, it has some truth to it, so I wanted to share it, right? The three Suizen vows, and even them being called Suizen vows, makes them something new because Suizen is something that, like, I think Watazumi Doso invented, right? That word. Nevertheless, they are number one, play and reject all evil. Play to reject all evil. Number two, play to master all that is good. And number three, uh, play to share the truth with everybody else, right? So in those three steps, first, you're rejecting everything that's evil. Second, you're aiming to master everything that's good. And third, you're playing not just for yourself, but for other people. So number one, rejecting evil. That's something that's kind of interesting, right? The if you think about the Bible, sometimes people think there's a lot of rules there. And there are, but really there's just one. And that's love God with all of your heart and all your mind and all your soul, all your strength. Right? Everything else flows into and from that. And also love your neighbor as yourself, of course, right? If you have those, you've got everything. The rest of, for example, the Ten Commandments, they're there to tell you the boundaries. Like, all right, this is what you can do, this is what you should do. And that's huge. Like, how do you love God? I mean, you can do that with your life every day, everything that you're breathing, the people that you meet. There's a billion creative and wonderful ways to do that, right? So the rest, everything is kind of giving you a boundary line. Like, here's how you know that you've lost that first thing, right? For example, you're lying. Uh, you're filled with a desire for things that aren't yours, right? Uh, you don't rest. That is the one that I have the most trouble with, by the way. My entire life has been learning to rest. I've always been allergic to wheat, and I spent the whole first 30 years of my life not knowing that I was really, really tired all the time. So I had to learn what it feels like and learn to recognize, oh, my body's tired now. Like I actually have to stop a little bit, right? Everybody's got their own things. Again, cheating on your spouse, right? You've obviously lost that love, right? And it also these times tell you what love is, right? It's not just a feeling. If it were just a feeling, then cheating on your spouse would be right because maybe it feels good, at least in the short term, right? Short-term pleasures are not included in this because we're going to the number one long-term pleasure, which is the best of all pleasures and something that never, nothing, and no one can ever take away from you, right? And that's God's presence. You've got this eternal love that's better than any kind of human love, better than any kind of human experience you can ever get. And there's nothing else. There's nothing else that you need. It heals your soul. It heals all the wounds that you have in your emotions. It helps you to direct your will, to know where you want to direct your attention. This is the one thing that all life flows from, and it's so good. So, rejecting evil is a good place to start. The second is mastering all everything that's good, and that's something that's kind of interesting. The word they use in that is same the shu from shu gyo. It's also shushi or a master's degree. It implies that you have had deep practice in doing something, so that doing good is something that you need to actually train your senses for, right? Ooh, the sun just went behind the clouds. Look at that, right? It's something that takes practice. And then playing for others, right? This doesn't mean that you're performing necessarily. Muon Shakuhachi is not primarily a performing art, not in my understanding. But the awareness that you're not doing it just for yourself is important. I pray together with my wife, I pray together with friends from my church, um, and that's so essential. But I also pray alone, probably more than anything else. That's not just for me though. I mean, when I'm praying alone, I'm praying for other people. I'm praying for all the people that are in my life who I love. I'm praying for myself that my vision, my work would be true, right? That I would kind of keep myself from meaningless distractions, that I wouldn't be addicted to screens and such, you know? Um, and sometimes just enjoying God's presence wordlessly, right? But when you do that, it's good for you. And if it's truly good for you, it's actually good for everyone in your life. It's not just about praying for other people, but it's about making yourself good and healthy so that you are present to everyone else in your life. A pastor that I like, Bill Johnson, he said that when God is first, everyone is first. It's no hierarchy of priorities. God is first, everybody is first, right? God made people. God loves people so much. If you're in touch with God, you've got supernatural love for everybody who crosses your path. And that love sometimes looks like confrontation, which can be uncomfortable because sometimes it means just saying something that's true. Um, Love doesn't always feel good right away because love is a big thing. It's really big. The main thing, though, the main thing I get out of these three rules, right? Refuse all evil, master all good, play for others. The beginning of any spiritual practice in Christianity is that you have to be refusing evil. I'll give you an example. There's something, I believe it's in the third chapter of Peter's first letter in the New Testament, where he says something to the effect of, you know, your husband, treat your wife as somebody who's extraordinarily precious, right? The most valuable vase in the house that's like gilded with gold, and you want to be careful you don't drop it and smash it. Um, Treat her with extra care, because if you don't love your wife, your prayers will be hindered. Or I think it's put actually the opposite way. It's like, so that your prayers will not be hindered, don't do this. The idea is that if you have if you're clinging to something that you know is wrong in your heart, and then you're trying to kind of have this spiritual practice and experience the presence of infinity, um, the presence of the eternal being, God, those are incompatible. The beginning is that things have to be clean, right? So here's what we do in Christianity. Obviously, there's forgiveness. So if you have done something that you know is wrong, it doesn't mean there's no consequences, but it does mean that there is absolute forgiveness. And forgiveness means that you can be present with God again, no matter what you've done, no matter what um, evil or big thing or small thing that has happened in your life. None of that is powerful enough to keep you from God's love. That's true. How about that? Um, there's forgiveness in Jesus. Jesus died. He was perfect. He rose from the dead. He loves you. You're forgiven, right? So that may mean that you actually, to taste that forgiveness, you have to face consequences. If you did something horribly horrible, that is horribly illegal, you may have to spend some time in jail, but at least your soul is okay. So, which is worse, right? To spend forever burning in hell, like literally, like, you know, I mean, even right now, right? If you've got something like that in you, it makes you burn in hell, right? I don't even care what you think about hell in the ultimate sense, but it's really easy to experience hell right now, and maybe even that's enough. Who knows? So my point is that there is a way to reject evil, no matter what's going on, even if it's something that you're struggling with right now. Um, Again, so we talk about addictions. Addictions are things that we do wrong, even though we don't want to do them. Everybody has an addiction. I don't know anybody who has not had somewhat of an addiction. It may not be like an attend AA meetings kind of addiction, but it may be something that like you just keep doing this and you didn't want to do it. You knew it was wrong, but you did it anyway. All right, I drank too much again. I feel like crap. Why did I do that? I didn't want to do that. I said that last time, right? Well, there's something in you that maybe needs a little extra rest or a little bit of extra love. Again, my thing is just not noticing when I'm tired. If I get too tired, I start doing things that I don't want to do, right? It may be that you have emotional wounds that you are like making yourself insane over and you don't want to face them. And they actually need to be aired out so that they can heal. So that's where you need to find somebody who you can trust. That's important. Somebody who you can trust and talk to them about it. That helps. I'm not a Catholic, but I do admire Catholics a lot, especially for their sacrament of confession, where you take the priest who is ideally somebody that you can trust. I mean, you can make some jokes about that one, I'm sure, but if you had somebody like that in your life who's a spiritual leader in the community, you can trust them, and you've got this habit of going whenever you got to get something off your chest, you can talk to them and you can hear not just from yourself but from somebody else, like, hey, you're forgiven. And if you need to do something, here's what you need to actually do. It's not that you need to do something to be forgiven, but part of the act of being forgiven is turning your life around. So, you know, if you do something wrong, lots of times the remedy looks like it's opposite. Um, if you're wasting your life away looking at porn or something, maybe the remedy would be to honor the women in your life, do something good for them instead of reveling in women's humiliation on the screen, right? Um, so there are ways to deal with these things. When it's an addiction, though, sometimes you can't get there right away. Something interesting, I think, is that the intention is sometimes enough. I want to emphasize sometimes, but the intention to stop is sometimes enough. Uh, when you're first playing shakuhachi, maybe you're trying to make a sound. Have you noticed that the more you try, the worse it goes? Things that are directed by our subconscious and our unconscious usually can't be consciously learned. So getting rid of addictions and unwanted uh, evil in our lives is usually not as easy as just having this one act of the will of, I don't want to do it. Oh, I didn't will that hard enough. I don't want to do it. Right? That doesn't work, does it? Have you tried it? It doesn't work. I've tried it. It doesn't work. I guarantee it doesn't work. In the same way that make a sound, make a sound. You start blowing harder and your muscles get all tense, and everything that needs to happen to open up and relax to make that nice sound happens less and less and doesn't happen even harder. So, how do you make a sound? Right? What you do is kind of you trust and you practice and you do the right thing. So, you let go of the things that you can't control, which is making a sound. What can you control? Well, I can hold the flute. That's one thing I can do. I can cover the finger holes. If I'm playing a piece, I can move my fingers the way that piece wants me to move the fingers, or at least I can practice doing that, and I can get better concretely with practice. It's just moving your fingers. I can sit up straight, right? And as you're doing those things and concentrating on the practices that will facilitate a sound, eventually it just comes by itself. Right? It comes when you're ready. You're learning that all things, our bodies are made wonderfully, right? And they can do all kinds of things just by themselves. If you put yourself in this position and you do the surface level things, and then importantly, you have that intent in your heart that, oh, I'd like to make a sound. That's enough. That will do it. You also just have to be patient because it doesn't come right away. So it's the same thing for kind of getting rid of unwanted actions that we have. There goes that sunlight again. It's kind of a warm winter morning here. Warm-ish. It's 10 degrees Celsius and there's still 3 or 4 feet of snow outside, but some of that is melting bit by bit. So I think you can get rid of these things by not focusing on getting rid of them, in a sense. Just having the intention that you don't want to do that, and maybe having the intention that you do want to do something else. Something that I do personally is that when number one, I try to notice when I'm getting tired. So I can feel it in my body, right? There'll be kind of a tightness in my back here. There's things that I can feel that like in my mind, it's starting to get dry. I get this kind of dry feeling in my mind. I don't know if that makes sense, but when I start to feel it, like, okay, it's time to rest. And that's a decision that I can make. That's something that I can do. If I pay attention, I can do that. And then I've decided, well, what helps me to rest? There's a lot of things that help me to rest. Actually, like reading the Bible and that kind of stuff, it's not something that I feel like doing when I'm really tired. I might listen to somebody reading it, that can work. But lots of times I just want to read an entertaining book, and I found that's a really good way for me to rest. When I start reading a book, I start getting tired, and I sleep. That's exactly what I need when I need rest. It works really nicely. Other things I'll do is kind of listen to an interesting podcast or something like that. So there are things you can do that are not the thing that you're trying to avoid that will facilitate that thing that you're trying to avoid, right? Or there are things that you can do around that thing that you do want to do, making a sound, that will facilitate making that sound, right? The way to control things that you can't control is not to control them, because you can't. So stop it. That was a Bob Newhart or something. There was an old something that my dad showed me, a comedy sketch with this guy, and he's a psychologist, and this woman, but people come into him and pay a lot up for psychological advice, and they're like, I have this fear of elevators. I just can't get on an elevator. It makes me afraid every time I do it. He's like, all right, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm going to say. Okay, are you listening? Listen to this. Stop it. and that's his, right? But obviously that, the reason that therapists don't do that is that it doesn't work, right? You want to stop it, but you can't stop it. Or you want to do it, but you can't do it because you're trying to control something that you can't. Back to the original conversation. All of this is to say that if you want to be able to pray from the heart or play from the heart, the Muonji little placard there actually has that pretty much right. You have to have your life in order, or at least be oriented towards ordering your life, right? Hate what's evil and love what's good. And if you're doing that, and if you have an attitude, not that you've attained it, this is another quote from something that the Apostle Paul wrote, not that you've reached it completely, but you have this attitude of letting go of what's behind and pressing on towards what's ahead. That's enough. If you're doing that, then you're in a good place. Nearly every spiritual practice in Christianity has this as its prerequisite, right? For example, there's a book called The Cloud of Unknowing, which is a relatively silent practice of prayer that just includes maybe one word or even just a silent intention of connecting with God. It can look on the surface pretty much like Zazen. It's just that the actual faith and intent behind it is maybe slightly different, but it's quite similar. And in that book, it was written in the 1300s and by somebody in England, I believe. The author writes that if you want to do this practice, the first thing you have to have is an obedient life in the church. Like, you have to be connected to a community, you have to be worshiping God. You can't use this as a replacement for that stuff, because that stuff is the grounding that we're building this on, right? So you have to be living a good life, or a life that is oriented towards the good, for this to work. And to me, that's very true, right? You saw me put this in a little earlier. What I was going to show you is that if you've got something evil in your shakuhachi, guess what? It won't make a sound, right? Getting your life ordered, rejecting all evil, practicing what's good is like taking that rag out. You can make your own sound, nice and free. You're free. Your feelings are free as well, right? There's something about, I played something that sounded a little bit like Takeochi, even though it wasn't Takeochi just now. Takeochi is about letting your feelings flow. It's about the flow of water. When things are unstuck, your feelings flow just the way that they need to. When things are stuck, they don't flow the way that they need to. Example, if you have a big secret, I mean, I guess the textbook example would be you're cheating on your spouse. That's like, you know that it's bad and you're hiding it. You are not free to feel anything, right? You might have these sort of momentary bursts of fleeting pleasure, but most of your life is going to be increasingly hellish if you do that. That's where feelings get stuck. Or again, like maybe anger, rage at something, right? Somebody did something to hurt somebody you love, and maybe you feel impotent to do anything about it, or you feel this rage about them and you don't have anywhere to put it. Or maybe you're mad at somebody close to you and you feel bad for being mad at them and you don't know how to express it, so you push it down and push it down until it inappropriately explodes in a different way in a time when it has actually nothing to do with what you're really angry about, where what you actually would have needed was just to learn to be a little bit more assertive and say, like, hey, I didn't like it when you do that. And that would have been enough, but instead it got really big, and then you started busting your lid over something that you didn't need to bust it about. Interestingly, having that kind of internal and external unity, that oneness of being where what's inside, what you know is right and wrong, is consistent with your actions, that really makes things free to flow, and it actually makes you more confident too. It's easier to assert yourself. It's easier for everything to flow. It's easier to be sad when you're sad. It's easier to be happy when you're happy, because ideally, if you can really do this well, then you don't really have to be afraid of death because you're actually living. and you don't have to cling to life because you know that you have it, right? So that it kind of it works. It just works out, and the way that you treat people and interact with people is quite a bit more free, I would say. This is a good cup of coffee. There's this tendency to not be able to enjoy things because you think like, what if the World War III starts soon? Then everything's going to be over. The fact is, this is a good cup of coffee. Well, thanks for listening. Love you. Bye.